What is up, everyone? Welcome to another weekly news video. There's a few very spicy topics this week, actually, so we'll jump straight into it. The first thing I want to touch on is my video from a couple of days ago where I talked about the update regarding the Alt versus BGS lawsuit. If you haven't checked it out, please do so. But the clarification I wanted to make, or the update I wanted to give you all, is just based on a few of the comments that people have dropped on the video itself. And Neo Cards and Comics, who's got a very big channel, basically watched the video, and he's done this a few times, actually, and he's basically said, Daniel, they don't have a guarantee. It's on their website. It's pretty clear what he's talking about. Is essentially the gist of what I got from him saying there. And that's fair, right? And to go back to this issue at hand, what's actually happening here is, Alt is suing BGS. They're saying the card was trimmed, and they're saying, BGS, you guys owe us because you provide an authentication service, but you grading the card, it tells us the card's free from error. And people like Neo see that and see that statement on BGS's website, and they think, they've wiped their hands clean of the situation. Before we jump to the next topic, I just want to clarify, just because a business tries to absolve themselves of risk, right? They put a policy or they'll put something on their T's and C's and say, you know what, by you grading with us, you agreed to these terms. That doesn't always hold valid when it comes to consumer law and things like that. What you need to understand with instances like this, right, when you've got a business, right, and they're trying to absolve themselves of the risk of what their core business offering is to you as a customer, right? And in this case, the authentication of sports cards or trading cards, you almost always cannot get away with just trying to absolve yourself of risk there, right? Because your customers have an inherent expectation with regards to using your service, which is why this lawsuit's going to be pretty interesting because, depending on what the law, if it goes to court and depending on how it settles, this might have some widespread implications for us, normal collectors within the hobby. Because if for some reason BGS get away with making that kind of statement and get away with absolving themselves of risk and saying, you know what, even though you're paying us money to authenticate your cards, the authentication doesn't mean anything, that's very scary moving forward, in my opinion. Now, I'm very comfortable that if something was like this to happen in Australia, a collector had a similar issue here in Australia, our consumer law here is very, very strong. The fact that BGS open up submissions to us here in Australia would spell, pretty big problems for them from a class action lawsuit perspective when it comes to, the lack of providing an authentication, right? People have an inherent belief when they're submitting a card to you that you're going to do certain things. You can't just say, oh, you're going to tick this box and say you've absolved the risk. No, that's not how it works, right? Consumer law works a very specific way. So whilst Neo is correct that on the website, it doesn't state that, or it states that they don't give a guarantee, it's like, no, guys, you're using a service. You're giving your customers a service. You can't all of a sudden just turn around and try and absolve yourself of the risk. That's not how consumer law works, and that's not how you offer customers, a valid service. So sort of like a watch this space kind of thing with that. Let's see what happens next. Now, the next thing I want to talk to is another pretty interesting one because this came to light. I think Sports Card Radio posted it yesterday where Grant, one of the owners from Backyard Breaks, jumped in on a box break. I forget what it was. It might have been Immaculate, if I remember correctly, or even NT basketball, and basically bought a box and he hit an Anthony Edwards 1-of-1 Logoman. And pretty interesting for a few reasons, because obviously Backyard Breaks have had, a lot of accusations in the past around, loaded boxes and things like that. I don't think that's the case in this specific instance. Could hanky-panky be happening in the back end? Sure. Sports Card Radio talked about it a little bit in their live yesterday. The thing I want to talk to is, things that I see within the sports card hobby that make it really amateur, right? The fact that you've got an owner, the guy busting the product himself, right, buying into a break when, somebody's reached out to Sports Card Radio and said, there wasn't actually that, it wasn't like there was one spot left to fill. There was still 8 spots left when he bought in. This is like the amateur element within the hobby at the moment that's sort of letting the whole process down. It undermines the process. It undermines, the value that we get as customers. The fact that you've got businesses thinking it's okay to do this, right? What else are they doing in the back end? And I'm not just saying Backyard Breaks here. This goes for all of these businesses within the sports card hobby because they are all amateur. They all make dumb mistakes like this. What is happening in the back end that they're not telling us about? And that's the thing you sort of need to be careful with, right? On face value, when people are showing you what they're doing and they think it's okay to buy into a break, into their own break, and sort of not necessarily rip off their customers, but have customers miss out on a card that this person themselves have hit, what are they doing in the background that they also think is okay that wouldn't necessarily be, best practice for a business to do? Stuff like this is incredibly amateur. You would think when it comes to breaking, the last thing you want is sort of any, inherent risk or any questions being asked of you that, people can say, well, you've fudged the numbers here or you've ordered this break to get the spot yourself. You want to absolve yourself of that risk completely. And the way you do that is don't buy into your own breaks. Like if you're struggling to sell that last spot, do a giveaway, do a discount for the people that have already bought in, right? Do a random, or everybody puts in $10 and then the winner gets, that last spot. Like there's so many other ways you can sort of do this, and just doing it this way is so amateur and it's just so common within the hobby these days, like when it comes to repacks, grading services, group submitters, card shows, people selling cards. There's so many avenues where people are just, taking the short path, right? The easy way, the quick way, without doing things the right way. And not doing things the right way is then how you get asked questions like backyard breaks are being asked right now. It's just so utterly amateur, and it goes to why, I have some concerns about the hobby long term, because there are so many businesses that are this amateur with their approach to, providing value for their customers. That speaks volumes, in my opinion, for how so many of these businesses are struggling, number one, but what's going to happen in the long term if things like this continue to happen. It's just so amateur. You expect better from a business. There's a reason why backyard breaks look like they're struggling, and I think it's like dumb decisions like this that speak volumes for that once again. So please give me your thoughts on this down in the comments below, just because I think it's, utterly ridiculous. It's so amateur, but I'm not surprised because so many businesses within the hobby do the exact same shit. It's just utterly ridiculous. Now, the last thing I want to talk to today is this email that Sports Card Radio talked about yesterday. It's got 2 points and I want to talk to it, right? So they alluded to somebody that they've hated on in the past, reached out to them prior to the live and said, something, right? And then they announced in the video that it was actually Jeff Wilson. And I thought this was a pretty good thing for a couple of reasons. Number one, it was good to see, these guys have a common ground for the hobby, because it turns out that, a person that Sports Card Radio showed in their sports card vlog video from a couple of days earlier turned out to be maybe a known scammer. Jeff Wilson has got some evidence of this, so they want to sort of get together to try and call this guy out to try and protect people. And it's a really, really good thing. And I like that from Jeff. And Jeff has done similar things, in the past. And I like the fact that people can sort of set aside, differences for a common goal. And I've talked about this, on my channel as well, where, I say all the time, just because I call somebody out or, call them out for doing something dodgy, it doesn't mean that I hate the person, right? It just means I don't agree with you on this one thing. So the fact that, both of these guys can act like adults, right, and sort of see the bigger picture and do the right thing, for the hobby, that's a really, really good thing. Because as I've touched on in the past, when you've had people like, Mojo Sports or some of these other guys like Dan, the Great Curator, who's the ultimate pest when it comes to this, right? They just turn away from the negative completely. And yes, Jeff did try and sue Sports Card Radio or threaten legal lawsuits, so on and so forth. I don't want to get into that. But I like the fact that these guys can sort of see past things and sort of come together for that common knowledge to try and make the hobby better. And it goes to the other point on this where, Sports Card Radio have copped a lot of heat in the last few weeks. I actually did last week too with my PWCC video where, people are basically saying, well, you call out Golden all the time, but now you're saying use their service. Like, what's going on? You guys are hypocrites. You guys are clowns. There's a blowout thread talking about this as well. And it goes to the same thing with Jeff Wilson, right? Like, just because you're calling out a business for something, it doesn't mean that you have to sort of ignore them completely. You switch yourself off to it completely, right? I've talked about this before. The second you try and start doing that as an individual, you're selling yourself short. So you can have problems with Golden, but that doesn't mean you can't go onto their platform and find a card for cheap for your PC that you couldn't get anywhere else, right? Yes, you don't want to give Golden your money because some of these other things they've done, but you need to look at the bigger picture as well, right? And it's not just calling people out for the sake of calling them out and calling them out just to hate on them. It's calling them out to try and make the hobby better. So, like, I can see where people are coming from, given that there's been a bit of a 180 with some people in the hobby, not just Sports Card Radio in terms of the content, but when you look at the bigger picture, Sports Card Radio have been talking about, selling cards, like I said in my video the other day, and buying cards for well over 18 months. So it's nothing really new. I just found it odd that people were calling them out for that. Like I said, the same thing happened to me with my PWCC video, where basically I got called an idiot and a faker and all this sort of stuff for basically saying I bought a card of PWCC's auction. Okay, that's okay to do. I can call out PWCC for being shit like shillbitters in the past. I can call them out for some of these trimmed accusations in the past, but that does not mean I can't then buy a card off their platform, right? Because I've got a PC I want to try and build. I've got a card that I might want to give to somebody or sell at a card show or something along those lines to get a card in the hand of a collector. By us calling these things out, it does not mean we can't do anything then, right? We shut ourselves off from everything. I feel like I'm repeating myself now, but you guys get that point. That same thing happens there with Jeff Wilson and Sports Card Radio that I touched on. You sort of see the bigger picture. You try to do the right thing. You can look past these little elements and look and just go from there, right? And like I said a bit earlier, I say this all the time. If I hate on you, it does not mean I hate you as a person. I'll go buy your beer at a pub if you want, and you can talk shit over a beer and sell our differences there, right? It doesn't mean everything has to be absolute. And it was good to see these two guys try and do that. And then the reason why I flagged that is because, like I just said, you can also apply that to people asking them questions around why they're buying from Golden, why they're buying from PWCC. Okay, not everything has to be absolute, guys. So just keep that, front of mind, please. So I hope you did like the video. Please let me know if I missed anything down below. I just find this whole backyard breaks thing, pretty laughable in my opinion. It's just really amateur. So many businesses are like that. We need better within the hobby. It's just not good enough. It's just so amateur everywhere you look, and it's just really unfortunate that not enough people call that kind of behavior out, because it makes the hobby worse off when people act that poorly and don't act like you'd expect from a business. So again, please share your thoughts down in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.